Hey, aloha, everybody. This is Jeff Reinebold. This is the 25th edition. Oh, Mike, wait a second now. What am I saying? 85th edition. You think I'm not tired from all this football?
You've a full shift ahead of you tonight, Jeff. I don't know what
Yeah,
you're.
I do. You're right. But it's great to have everybody with us. What a weekend of games, and still got another one ahead of us coming tonight. Tell me, have you ever seen a more perfect game than the Bills played offensively in that game, Michael?
Look, I don't want to call out certain teams here, but there was a thing this morning about Patrick Mahomes scored 5 touchdowns last night. Josh Allen had basically a perfect game. I mean, the man done no wrong. So yes, it was amazing from Mahomes, but I've never seen a performance like that. Albeit though, Jeff, I don't think New England left Boston Logan Airport. My God. And do you know what? I'm just going to call out and say it, and you can trash me for saying it, Jeff, because I have kept to myself for 2 days, and I'm going to talk about this in about an hour or so. But if that was any other team, with any other coach, there would be a lot more talk about it today. Josh Allen was incredible, though. I have to give it to him, and I can't wait for this game at the weekend. It's going to be a hell of a game.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, you talk about a perfect game, and in baseball, a perfect game is, the pitcher gets everybody out, all 27 batters, so 9 innings out, and that's a really, really rare feat, and happens maybe once a year in professional baseball with all the games they played. But Allen had more touchdown passes than he had incompletions in an NFL game. 5 touchdown passes, 4 incompletions. They never had a longer third down situation than 3rd and 4 in the entire game. I mean, it was just incredible against the Bill Belichick defense. It's just almost defies description, really. I mean, it's really, really an amazing effort by the Bills. And certainly they're built to go in and handle those Chiefs. I think it's going to be a great game this weekend in Arrowhead. Hey, we talked all the time about having some friends on this week just to take a peek at the NFL and their NFL experiences. Well, today, Raiders Nation, you gotta be listening, because we have got Robin Ross, who coached linebackers for Coach Gruden, and in his first trip through Oakland, when they were the Oakland Raiders, is just about ready to join us. Robin is a football lifer, a tremendous coach, and a guy that's got his own football journey is really a crazy and unique one. So welcome to the show, Robin Ross.
Thank you, Jeff. Great being here.
Hey, now, I'm going to start you off this way, right? You're a kid that's growing up in Southern California and go to junior college. You're highly recruited offensive lineman out of junior college, and make the decision to spurn the probably more high-profile programs that were recruiting you in the Pac-8. Was it Pac-8 or Pac-10 at that time?
Pac-8.
In the Pac-8, to go north and play for Jim Sweeney at Washington State University. Why in the world? You could have gone to Cal, you could have gone to some other places, and you chose Washington State.
Well, it was all about the fit. Coach Sweeney could sell, ice cream to Eskimos. He was really good. It was a good fit all the way around. I had an ex-teammate from junior college that was already in school up there. And by being heavily recruited, and traveling around the country at that time, it's funny because visits were unlimited. So I took 10 trips. I went all over the country, looking at schools, and you hear so many things, and you get to the point where you really don't know what to believe. And so I had a teammate up there. I had another teammate going there. They're running the same offense. So it really came down to, I felt like it was the best fit for me. And Berkeley at that time had a little different philosophy going, back in the early 70s. So it was just a good fit for me to go to Washington State.
All right. Now, you played for Sweeney, who's a legendary coach, and, and on some, good Washington State teams, and played against some fantastic USC teams at that time. What was it like when you go down and play in the Coliseum against the Trojans?
Well, being from Southern California, that was always a big thing, playing in the Coliseum and going down there. And I remember it was my senior year, we're playing USC, and I was going against Gary Jeter, who was a All-American defensive lineman, I think from his sophomore year on. And, it was just a great experience going there. And I actually had a brother that went to school at USC. So, there was a little bit more anticipation as far as going down there and playing. And it was always a great experience, and we'd hang in there, didn't beat USC, but, they had great teams there. They were national championship teams. And, that was one of the things that attracted me to Washington State was the teams that we played. We played Ohio State in the preseason. We played Illinois in the preseason. In fact, my junior year, we played, I think we played Ohio State, who was number 1. We played USC, who was number 2 in the nation. And Ohio State was, Woody Hayes was the head coach. And we actually played him in Seattle, which that was the largest stadium in the state of Washington at that time. So, I look back at the experiences. We didn't win as many games you want to win, but it still gets down to the experience. And I think all the teammates and the things that you go through that really made it a valuable experience for me.
Robin, you get drafted, but the draft was a completely different situation than it is today. There was no, green room. There was no taking the top prospects to New York City or wherever the draft is and all of it. How did you find out that you were drafted, and what position were you drafted?
Well, it was funny because there weren't any workouts. You'd get a few phone calls from some teams that would ask about you, where are you going to be on draft day and that type of thing. And then I remember the draft was going on, but it wasn't any big deal. You couldn't even find it on the radio to listen to the draft. So you just kind of waited for the phone call to ring, for the phone to ring. So I remember I was back down in Southern California when the draft was going on, and, nothing happened the first day. So I'm checking the paper because, there's no internet. There's no other way to, get updated. So I'm checking the newspaper, and I think they had the first 7 rounds or whatever. And, that year, I think we went 17 rounds in the draft. So all of a sudden, the second day, I get a call about 6:30 in the morning Pacific time. And I get a call from the 49ers, and they said they drafted me in the 10th round. So that's how I found out. Monty Clark was the head coach. He called, talked to him. He put the offensive line coach on. Dick Enright was the offensive line coach. And he had actually tried to recruit me to Oregon coming out of junior college, so I knew him a little bit. And then they said, they'll be back in touch. And it was funny, Jeff, you talk about change of the times. One of the last things Dick Enright told me, he said, we're going to have a mini camp in a month. And he goes, make sure you have a haircut by then.
All right. Now, this is kind of a cool story because I remember you and I had talked about this at one point. You ended up as a 10th round draft choice. You ended up holding out with the 49ers, correct?
Yeah, what was interesting, the 49ers at the time, and the money was not even close to what it is now, but the 49ers at the time were really looking to sell the club, which I found out later. So when we started negotiating contracts, they said they had no money for a 10th round choice. And, at that time, you got your contract was $250 a week, room and board, or $200 a week, room and board. And then if you made the team, they said, we'll give you a $10,000 bonus. And then the contract was like $26, $28, $30,000 for a 3-year contract. So when they told me there was no signing bonus and you're going to spend the summer in camp making $200 a week, I had a better job than that working at a cardboard factory in the City of Industry. So it was like, I thought this was professional football. And so we went back and forth with that. And then finally, we just couldn't come to terms. I got an agent involved with it, and he couldn't get anything from him. So finally, when I wasn't going to report to camp, they said they would give me $500 for a reporting bonus. So I said, well, I think I'll pass on that, and wound up finally getting my release. And then the Seahawks wound up picking me up, and I wound up going to the Seahawk camp, and I was there for for 4 preseason games. And you got to remember, back at that time, we actually played 6 preseason games. So, on a 20-game schedule, and the camp was forever. I remember going 22 straight days, double sessions before we played our first preseason game, the first of 6. So it was Jack Patera was the head coach, and I tell you what, he was a Vince Lombardi, and it was a tough camp to go through.
All right, now, fans, if you want to get a chance to talk to Robin about his experiences in pro football and coaching with Al Davis and John Gruden with the Raiders, get in with us. Robin, you mentioned how different camp was in those days, right? How many up downs? If he was a Vince Lombardi guy, how many up downs do you think you did?
Well, it all depended on what kind of mood he was in. If he was in a good mood, you might do 10 before practice, before you ever stretch. Because the first thing you did when you got out there was you started doing up downs. Because he said you never play in a game fresh, so we're not going to practice fresh. So we're going to get you tired before you ever start practice. So if he was in a good mood, we'd only do 10, and he would just blow a whistle for every one. He goes, okay, get him up. And then he'd start blowing the whistle. And if he was in a bad mood, I remember it seemed like we did 50. And it seemed like we went forever. I mean, we could hardly get up off the ground. And then we would stretch, and then we'd start practice. So, yeah, it was a lot more intense. You hit every day. Pads were every day. I can't remember in those 22 practices. I think we might have had one non-padded practice. Everything else was a padded practice.
Fans, if you don't know what an up down is, like the closest I can come to is if you would do what they call in fitness circles a burpee, which is, but in an up down, when the coach blows the whistle, you start to run in place, and then when he blows the whistle again, you dive to the ground, get all your chest and your whole body on the ground, then push yourself back up and run in place again until the whistle blows again. So if you want to know a little bit about it, go out in the park and do it by yourself one time. And I'm going to tell you something. This was back before you practiced, and the legendary Vince Lombardi was the man we can thank for that. All of us of a certain age who remember doing up downs in football practice. Robin, you go to the Seahawks, and the Seahawks were an expansion team at that time, correct?
Yes, it was 1976, and it was the first year of the expansion. So the expansion teams were allowed more players in camp, and I'm not sure what the whole NFL limit. I know we had 120 players in camp, and I think the NFL was around 100 at that time, so we were given 20 extra players. And it was so crazy when I first got into camp there, and we had all these players and, the depth chart and that when they were making roster changes, because they were starting to, weed guys. From the day I got there, they were, changing guys in and out. I remember players, when you got taped, you'd put your number up on the chalkboard as far as, where you were in line. There'd be like 4 or 5 numbers, and you put your number down there. The trainer would come by and erase your number and tell you to take your playbook and go see the head coach because you're done.
That's how you found out if you got cut?
Yeah, that's how they were cutting guys. Because, as I said, there were so many guys in camp, and they were bringing guys in and taking them out. And, they were trying to put a team together, and they really didn't have a basis. They had the expansion draft. And they picked up some, mostly Mike Curtis was in that expansion draft, Ken Geddes. I was backing up Norm Evans, who had played for the Miami Dolphins. Ahmad Rashad was on the team at that time. There were a lot of older veterans that got, they picked up in the expansion draft. So they were trying to fill in and find the best available talent to fill in around that.
All right, now, give me the real goods, because Mike Curtis, and fans, if you are too young to know who Mike Curtis was, go ahead and get on YouTube and Google him, because there is some classic footage on NFL films of Curtis played linebacker in his best years with the Baltimore Colts. And was he truly as nuts as he was portrayed?
He was. I'll tell you what, I was an offensive lineman. He scared the hell out of me. I mean, he would look at you, and his eyes would just glare at you. And he was really a great guy once you got to know him. But he'd get out on that field, and he would look at you, and you're like, I don't know if I really want to block him. And he would really challenge you in practice. He would. He'd say, "You're going to block me?" He wouldn't buckle his chin strap, and it was a full speed drill, and you're supposed to block him. And he'd look at you, and go, "You ain't going to block me." It just he was, and he was a good guy to be around. But boy, when he was on the field, he was, because everybody knew the stories about him, they knew how he was, and nobody wanted him to snap on you.
That's amazing. Hey, your NFL career comes to an end. You get into the coaching business, and you have coached at some pretty amazing places. Long Beach State, University of Cincinnati. Then you head back west, and you go back to Washington State. You coach at Oregon, Oregon State, Iowa State.
Right.
What was your favorite stop along the way?
I tell you what, Jeff, I enjoyed all of them. It was special going back to my alma mater, going back to Washington State, but it was a short time. I went with Jim Walden, and he was there. I get back there for a year, and then he decides to take the Iowa State job, so I wind up having to leave. But going back there, we beat USC and Pullman for homecoming on the first time. I think it was 35 years since Washington State had beaten USC. So, that was a special time and stuff going there. Iowa State, I spent 7 years, and in that time there, we beat Oklahoma, we beat Nebraska, and, there were always special moments. I still stay in touch with players from those teams. The Oregon, we had a lot of success. I was there twice, actually. It was funny, at Oregon, I actually coached a lot of positions. My first year, I was the inside backer coach. My second year, I was a D-line coach, and I went to the Raiders for 2 and came back, and I was the tight end special teams coordinator for 4 years. So I really got a chance to work with a lot of different players and a lot of different positions, when I was at Oregon. And at Oregon State, I had a lot of, players I still stay in touch with, and, then going to Western Washington as the head coach. So, it's hard to say what was my favorite because, there were, great things about every one of those. And there was never a place where I say I was just miserable, coaching. 'Cause that's what I enjoy doing. I always had good players and that I enjoyed coaching.
All right. Now we're going to take a little trip down the freeway from Corvallis and hit to Oakland, California, and you go work for the legendary Hall of Famer Al Davis. And what was it like? Because I had a chance to interview for a job at the Raiders one time, and just being in that building was incredible. But what was it like to be a part of the Oakland Raiders?
It was really surreal because he was so much a part of putting the NFL together. From being, and he was a coach himself. So it wasn't like you're dealing with an owner that made his money in real estate or some other business. He was a football coach. So, you weren't going to, BS him with anything. He wanted you to be very matter of fact. And really, I tell you what, I learned more things from him. I'm not saying it was easy working for him, but really, you learn a lot of football, just the way he looked at the game, the way he looked at personnel. He had his scheme ideas that, and nobody ever totally agrees with anybody's scheme. Everybody's got a better way of doing it anyhow. But the whole experience, I got to say, I learned, as much football in those 2 years that I have, in my 45 plus year career of coaching. And I think every year, football's an evolving sport, and coaching, I think you're always evolving, and you learn as much from the players as I think the players ever learn from you. So, that whole Raider experience, with, John Gruden and, on the defensive staff, originally was Willie Shaw, and then our secondary coach was Chuck Bresnahan, and, Mike Waffle was our defensive line coach, and just working with them, it was, it was a great experience. And like I said, I think I learned a lot of football, and, we had some good teams back then, and the first year I was there in '99, we wound up, we went 8-8 and missed the playoffs. And you might remember this one. We were playing, it was Y2K. It was right after the 2000, and we played in Kansas City. And we go into overtime, and we kick a field goal in overtime to win the game, and John takes off running around the field, like we just won the Super Bowl or something. And I found out later that they said that, well, you probably would have lost your jobs if you hadn't won that game. Because John was on a 2-year, I was there the second year of his contract, and that was year 2, and he had an option on it. So it was a 2-year with an option. So I heard that later on about it. So, but then the second year, they made some changes on the defensive staff. Chuck Bresnahan became our defensive coordinator, brought in Ron Lynn as our secondary coach, and really had a real good team. Went 12-4, and we went to the AFC Championship and eventually lost to the Super Bowl champ, the Baltimore Ravens. So it was a great experience as far as that. We had we really had a good team. Rich Gannon, got there I think right after I did. And once I got there, they were still putting the team together and things. And Rich Gannon came in. I'd known Tim Brown from working one of his camps before. He was there. The linebackers I had, Greg Beekard was as solid of a pro linebacker as you ever want to see. And we had some really good people with it, and I know I saw one of the up here talking about how dysfunctional it was. I don't know if it was totally dysfunctional, but it was getting the locker room right. And I think, John did a great job, and the personnel people of getting our locker room right. Now, we had some guys that were a little bit out on the fringe, but we had the Rich Gannons, we had the Greg Beekards, we had the Tim Browns, and they really set the tone for, what kind of team we were. I think that's what took us to the championship, the AFC Championship. And really, if Rich hadn't got hurt, I would have liked our chances to get to the Super Bowl and win that.
Hey, now, when people talk about Mr. Davis and they mention, like you said, how everybody that I know of that's worked for him all say the same thing. He was a football guy through and through. Watched practice film every day, could critique every position, knew exactly what he wanted personnel. When he looked at players, Robin, what was the first thing Al Davis looked for in a player?
It was speed. There were a lot of things he really looked for, but speed was the ultimate thing that he really looked for. If you notice him when he would go to the NFL Combine, he would sit at the start of the 40 the whole time because he wanted to see guys run the 40. And he would take their Combine 40 time. And we actually had a conversion where from the NFL Combine 40 time to what they ran on campus, or if it was converted to grass. So everything was converted because the AFC West was all grass except for Seattle at that time. So he had everything converted to a grass time, which is like a half a tenth on the 40. So his whole thing was really, it was speed, and the 40 times were big. He was really big also on hand size. He would not draft players with small hands. He always said, the greatest football players that have ever played the game all had big hands. And that goes for a lot of positions, the offensive line, defensive line, wide receivers, quarterbacks, so it was interesting the way, because he had so much history of the game and just knowing the game so well.
Now, Oakland Alameda Coliseum, where you guys played, still had a baseball field there because Oakland A's used the same field, correct?
Right.
Okay, so tell me about the black hole. How did that happen? How did all that stuff come to be?
The black hole was great. I tell you, if you are a Raider coach or a Raider player, there's no better day than game day at Oakland Coliseum. They tailgated. It was like Halloween every Sunday. They had their and we knew all these guys, like the one guy had the spikes on his shoulder pads and stuff, and the alien, and these guys were all true to life characters, and we would have functions like afterwards at a hotel by there, and they'd show up in that and have a beer with the team, and you really got to know them. And everywhere you went, we'd be in New Orleans and they'd be there in the lobby. We'd go to Green Bay and they'd be there in the lobby. So the fans were awesome. And the black hole, I'll tell you what, it was intimidating when you went in. You know, the attendance, I remember the first year I was there, it didn't seem like we sold out a whole lot. And then the second year when we got rolling, you know, and started winning a lot of games, and we won the Western division of the American Football Conference. And, you know, it was so, there were so many people. That thing was loud and it was intimidating because you couldn't hear anything in the black hole. I mean, literally, if your offense was trying to make a play call down there, you could count on they're going to jump off sides because you could not hear a thing. It was so loud down there, and you had everybody dressed up.
You know, they have come to London and played, and Rilla Gorilla and all those characters that you're talking about, those guys made the trip over to London and were full. They were full costume for the game. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Oh, like I said, it was Halloween every Sunday. You know, you go through the parking lot. My wife she loved to just be in the parking lot and watch all the people, you know, because they're bigger than life there. And, you know, I'd get dropped off for the game, and she'd bring the car back later on. And I mean, you just go through the parking lot and the crowd and, you know, being on the sideline. What was amazing is just all the people that, you know, you'd see on a sideline. I remember one day coming off after pregame warm-up, and I walked by, and there's Carlos Santana standing on the sideline, you know, just watching pregame. It was like, wow. And the Legend Raiders were always around. You know, Jim Plunkett was doing the radio. Ted Hendricks would go on trips with us. You know, so it's really, you know, Jim Otto he was working for the organization at that time. You know, on the staff was Willie Brown and Freddie Bolitnikoff. So, you know, you had so much tradition, and so much of the Raider family was all there from, you know, the old, American Football League. Jeff, I just lost your voice.
This had to happen. I'm joking. Jeff, go in and come out again, and we will see the crack. Just come in and come out again. I'm sure your audio will work then. It might be your battery or something. But I'll bring him back in if he behaves. It's all good. Obviously, Robin, great to hear from you so far as well. There's a few people that are asking you some questions. Ricky saying hello. Fred saying hello. Fred saying he's asking, you know, did you find times where the locker room is what was a camaraderie like in the locker room in Oakland?
You know, I tell you what, like I was saying, the locker room was really good because we had a good mix. You know, we had players that were, like I said, were a little bit out on the fringe, but we had some really good pro players that, you know, really took charge of that locker room. You know, Rich Gannon was such a competitor. I remember we had lost a game at Pittsburgh, actually, back there, and sitting with him in the airport. And he was so frustrated by losing the game, and just, you know, felt like, you know, everybody needed to do more, you know. And it was amazing how the locker room responded, you know, and that was the thing, you know. It was just because, you know, and I believe in pro sports, you know, your locker room is key. You got to have the right locker room. And I really felt like, you know, we had a good mix in the locker room. You had your great players, but you also had your guys that were, you know, they were great players and athletes, but, you know, they kind of walked on the fringe a little bit and wanted to do their own thing. But, you know, on game day, everybody, you know, pulled it in and pulled it together. And really, you know, it wound up being a real fun year.
Robin, when you looked at the Raiders this year, you know, you went and saw them play live late in the season, I know, and what was your take on just how far they've come from being a really bad football team a couple of years ago?
You know, I think they're making good strides. I mean, I really do. You know, making the playoffs, you know, winning those games down the home stretch, you know, I think they made, you know, some real good strides in it. And they look to where they were. They remind me a little bit of where they were the first year I was there, where, you know, we didn't make the playoffs. We were an 8-8 team. We missed the playoffs by a game or whatever and stuff. And, you know, this year, you know, they made the playoffs. You know, I think that's a good start, you know. And, I think, the quarterback, I think he's a real competitor. I've seen him since he was at Fresno State, and I still think he's got the ability to be an elite quarterback. I think, they need to keep building the roster. And, obviously it starts up front with their lines. But I tell you, Max Crosby the other day, I mean, he was a dominant defensive lineman, which is what you need. So, I mean, I think they're going in the right direction. It'll be interesting to see, just what they do as far as, changes they will make, at which, there's always going to be changes. Even the year we went from my year one to year two, we had, I think 3 coaching changes in it. So it'll be interesting to see the direction they go. I think, Mark is, they're getting settled in Las Vegas. And, the Raiders draw wherever they are. That's the one thing I noticed. It didn't matter where we played. We always had Raider fans. The hotel was always a Raider hotel. It didn't matter where we played. It was always like that. And I think that's really true now with, the Vegas identity, starting to come alive and getting a chance to have full stadiums this year for the first time, in Las Vegas. So, I think they're on the, the right trend. Hopefully they can continue to, improve and, move forward and, get that. But, they got a tough division too, that they're playing in the, the AFC West.
There's some great rivalries in that AFC West. I thought for all of the things that he had to go through when, and in coaching, it's crazy because you may never get an opportunity and you can never predict when your opportunity is going to come or how it's going to be presented to you. But Rich Bisaccia did a phenomenal job, I think, when you look at all of the stuff that he had to endure and that team had to endure to have a chance to even play to get into the playoffs against the old AFL rival in the Chargers, and to be able to pull that off and then go to Cincinnati and have a chance to win the game at the end of the game. I don't know what else the guy's got to do I hope he gets an opportunity to keep his job.
Yeah, I do too. You talk about from all the turmoil that they came out of, when the whole thing, when John resigned and that, and pulling the team together and getting them focused and, like you said, competing to get themselves into the playoffs and winning that last game. I mean, that San Diego game was a great game to watch, and so I think there's a lot of key ingredients there. And like you said, who knows what's going to happen? I think Richard definitely deserves, a chance to, you'd like to see him coach that team and keep it together to see where it can go. I think, sometimes in pro sports, you see it where they make decisions, that seem kind of short-sighted and not looking at the long-term situation of it. Because, Jeff, as you and I know, when a team changes over, there's a lot of pieces to change. I mean, nothing's the same. Chemistry changes, coaches change, players change, administrators change, and all those things, disrupt the flow of how business is going. So, I think Richard definitely deserves, because they show that, they were on the right track. They're moving in the right direction. And, there's a lot of teams that, didn't make the playoffs this year that would be, they'd love to say, hey, we made the playoffs. Well, we lost the first round, but we made the playoffs, because there's a lot of teams that did this year.
Yeah. Hey, now, as a guy that played the game at the NFL level and coached the game at the NFL level, what was your biggest takeaway from the wild card weekend that we just had?
I think is interesting is the expanded wild card. I saw an article talking about, the blowout games and the non-competitive games and things like that. And when you start thinking about it, well, you're letting more teams in. So, and those teams, you only have the one first round bye, but you got teams that are, a little bit more, they're having, marginal years or whatever, just over 500 playing a really good team. And I think you see a little bit of that of, maybe by opening up the field, they talk about in college football, well, what do you want to expand the field past 4? Because the semifinal games were blowouts anyhow, but it still gives you the opportunity, I think, when you expand the playoff system to really see who is the best football team, in the NFL right now. And I think we'll see that at the end of this, because, there's only, the two teams get the first round bye. And it's always funny, Jeff, too, coming off the first round bye. As you know, even up in Canada when we do it, there's when you didn't play and you watch everybody else playing, that you're not really sure how you're going to respond from that off week. You're going to come out, you still have that edge you had when you left the season, or, they just played a game, they just won a game, and now you're, and you've been sitting around. So, I think it's always interesting when you come off that bye week as far as, is it an advantage or a disadvantage? And I think it's probably, the healthier team and, how you go into that bye week.
Yeah, that is certainly a crapshoot at best. And a lot depends on your leadership and your experience and all those other factors. Mike, come on out here. Where did my man Michael go? There he is.
How about you caught me off guard there?
Huh?
You caught me off guard. Sorry, guys. How's it going?
Good. Hey, throw a question at us before we let Robin go. Robin, I took a bunch of your time. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Enjoy this.
We've got David, who is in Glasgow, asking, have you any fun stories that you maybe haven't told anybody before, but from the locker room?
What was interesting, kind of a funny story, is when I first got hired at the Raiders, I'm the linebacker coach, and the first time you really have a lot of interaction is during the draft meetings. So you go to the combine, you meet everybody, you have your dinners and things, and then we're sitting in a draft meeting, and Mr. Davis, he was really big on the Senior Bowl because it was all about talent playing talent. He wanted to see the best versus the best. So in the Senior Bowl, puts the best players in college coming out and puts them against each other. So we would watch Inside Run, we would watch Skelly, we would watch all the scrimmages, we would watch the Senior Bowl over and over and over again. So I'm in the first meeting, and so we're kind of laying out what we're looking at the draft, who we want to draft, and all these things. And you have the whole organization in there. I mean, you got the owner, you got all the scouts, you got player personnel, you got pro personnel, and you got all the coaches sitting in there. So there's about 40 of us all sitting in there. So we're watching the inside run from the Senior Bowl practice. And all of a sudden, Mr. Davis, he says, Robin, tell me what you tell your outside linebacker when the ball goes away from him. And I said, well, he's got counter reverse bootleg, and then he takes a pursuit angle to the football. He goes, no, he has the red light. I said, okay, he has the red light. So
what was that?
Yeah, I mean, this is, so you're sitting there, okay, answer the question. So then next play comes up and they run a lead at the inside linebacker. And he says, Robin, what do you tell your inside linebacker when a fullback lead blocks on him? Said, Mr. Davis, we take him through the V of the neck and we play him. We take him in the backfield and we turn him to where our help is, inside or outside. He says, no, we take him through the face. And I'm going V of the neck, through the face. Okay, I'm not going to argue that point. So he says, because when I'm talking to him and you're talking to him, we're saying the same thing.
You know what? That is genius, because one of the challenges, Mike, this is really high level football stuff, because one of the challenges is football is not that complex a game, right? But the language around football is ridiculous, because you may be playing for the Raiders and you say through the face, and you may be playing for the Seahawks and you say through the V of the neck, and you're talking about a difference of 2 inches, right? And that's what drives players crazy when they change teams. Is it might be a hook route for the Seahawks and it's a stop route for the Raiders and a curl route for Jacksonville, but it's the same play. I mean, it's just the language around the game is so crazy. Robin, it's been a blast having you with us and giving our viewers a chance to throw a question at you. Give me your prediction for tonight and how you see this game, because it's a crazy one. The Cardinals are outstanding on the road. terrible at home. The Rams are inconsistent, and now it's in SoFi. You either win or you go home kind of game. How do you see the game tonight?
Being from LA, I got to be, I grew up being a Ram fan. So I've got to go with the Rams. But like you said, playoff football, anything can happen. The Cardinals have struggled a little bit, towards the end of the season. But you don't know what Ram team's going to show up. Matt Stafford, if he doesn't throw interceptions, I mean, he's a quality quarterback. He can make a lot of throws and make a lot of plays. So, it should be a good game, I would think. But like I said, I got to go with, just because of the hometown, I got to go with the Rams. And I think it'll be interesting to see how the defenses, you always talk about the offenses, how they're going to do. But I think this is going to really come down to which defense, can you hold, Tyler Murray down? Can you keep him contained, have a good game plan against him? I think that's going to be huge for the Rams. If they can do that, I think they'll eventually, score some points, because Stafford, they've got a lot of talent there, and Cooper Kupp is catching the ball and making plays all over the field. So, I think it should be a good game. It'll be interesting because, these teams have played each other twice already. But, it should be a good playoff game.
I appreciate it, my man. That's Robin Ross, ex-Oakland Raider linebacker coach, one of the really good guys in the coaching business. Thanks for coming on the show, Robin.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Robin.
All right,
Thanks
Michael.
so much, Robin, for coming on.
Yep, that was awesome. Hey, what do we got from our fans out there, from the tribe out there?
There's a lot.
Hit them. Let's go.
Right. So Sean Minahan, who I'm just going to presume he's from Ireland, says, last night's top wasn't as jazzy as his shirt on Saturday night, coach. I think he means like your shirt, your top, like your t-shirt wasn't as jazzy. Can I just say very quickly here, Neil Reynolds' shirt on Saturday night, was in that same territory that people were talking about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I thought it was fantastic, but the design, it was nice. It was jazzy.
Yeah, I think Neil's taking a step up sartorially. He's Mrs. Reynolds must be dressing him. He's done it. I thought he's done a good job.
There's so many comments here. Kevin Fippen says, I think the Rams are going to win tonight, but it'll be very, very close. Sporting Rights, he's taking the Cardinals all tonight, all the way. Thinks LA are lucky to have made it. Super Tom is taking LA. Lloyd's taking the Rams. Arizona have fallen off a cliff with no D Hopkins. Daniel in the UK, Arizona to win by 17. 3 Stafford interceptions and 2 rushing touchdowns for James Conner. 1 touchdown for anyone. Rams will get a consolation, 1 touchdown for Cooper Kupp. Kev in England, Arizona due to putting pressure on Stafford to force mistakes. And Drapers Toshi, who I think is in Ireland, Arizona, so the 49ers can get revenge and beat them in the NFC Championship game. In terms of questions, Jeff, we've got a few. We've got some on the chat for a start. Evening to Fred Flunk. He is fuming over McCarthy's show. Now, to be fair, that's not a swear word in Ireland, so I have to put it on the screen. He's not happy after last night.
You know what, Fred? I think there is so much unrest in Cowboy Nation right now, because the frustration that they must feel having such a good football team on paper and playing the way that they played in a big game in your own stadium. 14 penalties. 14 penalties. And I know Noel Gallimore has come out and said, he put it all on me. It was my fault. I let the Cowboy Nation down. But, he's concerned for his family's health, because apparently the fans have gone unruly in Dallas. And, in a way they have a right. There's no way that they should have lost that football game. And everybody wants to talk about the last call and the execution of the last call, but there's a lot of calls along the way that, you could go on either side and say, that's a good call or that's not a good call, but that's football. But you got to make the plays, but you can't beat yourself, and penalties is the first way you beat yourself.
How's the head, Jeff? It's been a very tiring few days. I fell asleep during the Steelers game, so I don't know how you stood there for 12 hours. And I mean that in a positive way, in a caring way. how he's doing it. Like, how are you, Neil? I mean, at least Baldy's in Florida, yeah. So I mean, at least
Yeah, he's in Florida, but it's coffee and it's watching the game and trying to stay in the game as if you were coaching the game, or put yourself in that mindset, situational mindset. But I thought they were really, other than obviously the Steelers. Interesting, wasn't it, watching the Steeler game, how when Matt Canada, the offensive coordinator, was calling the plays, they couldn't move the length of their arm. And then they got into no huddle, and Ben took over on the line of scrimmage and called everything from the line of scrimmage, and they moved the ball effectively. I know Kansas City played a little more vanilla during that, but that's what happens when you go no huddle. They can't get all the blitzes called and all that stuff. So that was interesting to me, because the Steeler offense probably was a little better this year than what we were shown, particularly the last couple of weeks. They were miserable in the first half of that game last night.
TJ Watt had us all scary biscuits for a good 20 minutes as well. That was very interesting. And if Kansas City start the game next week against the Bills like that, we could be in for a classic. I actually think now, I know he says every year, I think next week could be unbelievable, Jeff. And you know what? There was a couple of blowouts this weekend. That 49ers Dallas game was, for a neutral, was fantastic to watch. I mean, it just didn't stop. There's a load of different things here. So Owen Thomas is saying, do you have a sofa to sell? I mean, I'm presuming you just sit down and watch the game whenever you go off camera. Yeah, you go down.
There's a little area where you can go and watch the game on the big monitor, but it'd be tough to have to stand there for 14 hours, whatever that was yesterday.
We've got Steve Tasker coming up here. Who have you got tonight? Rams or Cardinals?
You know what? I'm going to tell you something. I think the Rams will win the game, but it's interesting. The Cardinals are I think they've only lost once on the road all season, and this is an on the road game. These teams split. Each team won in the other team's house. I've got two ex-players playing on the Cardinal side, so I'd like to see those guys continue to play. The biggest joy I get out of coaching is when you see guys that you've had an opportunity to work with stand underneath the confetti. That's pretty cool. And still got about, I don't know, 6 or 7 guys still playing in the playoffs that I've coached in the past. So I always root for those guys. I'm a McVay fan. I'd like to see him get a team back to the Super Bowl. I'd like to see Matt Stafford at the end of his career have a chance to, do the same thing. But I think it's going to be a hell of a game. I mean, I think it's going to be a great football game, and I'm looking forward to calling it tonight on Sky. So
1 a.m., Jeff.
Hey, I'll be there. Don't you worry about that. Any more questions? And then let's go to Steve Tasker.
Yes, sir. We've got a couple of ones here to make sure we have the right one. Sorry, Jeff. It's been a busy few days. Stuart Dixon thinks the Bills are going to win the Super Bowl. This, I think this one was for coach for the other coach, but Fred saying, does it not shine a light on how poorly run the Raiders front office is under Mark Davis? So I guess he meant in comparison to now, or comparison to that must have been a question from previously. Do you want to comment on that, Jeff? Or
yeah, what's interesting about that is they had they got rid of a bunch of front office people right before this season started. And, there was a lot of controversy swirling around that. I think what Robin said was true. I think Mark Davis is starting to get his feet up underneath him and feeling himself as, he's you can't understand. Like when I went in to interview at Oakland, Mr. Davis's shadow was so large and so long, and it was over everything in that building. And then all of a sudden, even though it's been probably 10 years since he's been with us, it takes a long time for all of that influence and all of that, shadow to get off of Mark. And, as his son, he carries his name. It's been tough for him, I'm sure, in a lot of ways. And my understanding is he's now starting to feel himself more confident as an owner and as the leader of the team. So, I think that's my take, if you will, on the Raider front office.
Exciting time for the Raiders as well. Next year, sort of getting more into Vegas, and it'll be interesting to see how they get on in that new stadium for another year, for third year in Vegas. Jeff, just before we put Steve Tasker on, I want to tell you about my strategy for tonight.
What's that?
Strategy. Sky, record 1 a.m. Go to bed at 11:30. Wake up at 6:15. Airplane mode, Wi-Fi off, Bluetooth off, alarm on, 6:15, tea, toast, duvet, blanket, glasses. Put the game on. Fast forward. I'm gonna have to fast forward for your analysis. Now I feel bad. I'm not gonna know what the score is. I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna relax. I'm gonna be fresh as a daisy, please God. And yeah, I'm taking the Rams. I was really set on taking the Cardinals, for the last couple of days. There's a lot of Cardinals fans in Ireland. I don't know why, but good team this year, obviously. But I'm taking the Rams. Big pressure tonight on McVay. Like this team have to get to the Super Bowl in LA.
Well, they paid.
Kroenke won't take any excuses.
I tell you what, Les Snead's gone all in. They've done everything that you could need. They've gone after every player that was available that could help them, and they've gone all in. And you're right. This is now. It's amazing coaching because 3 years ago they're in the Super Bowl, and McVay is the hot young guy and all that, and he still is. But there are going to be some questions asked about if they can't, with this roster, if they can't get at least back to the game. So it's going to be an interesting game.
Enjoy the game tonight. Is you, Sean, Neil, Baldy, Coffee. This is Coffee with Coach tonight. I can't wait to watch this in the morning and we laugh my head off.
All right. Hey, want to bring in now, and then we're going to say goodbye. But want to bring in one of the really, really great special teams players that ever played in the NFL. I think he and Matthew Slater, maybe if they ever induct a special teams player into the Hall of Fame, these would be guys that would go. And Steve has been a nominee a number of times for a Hall of Fame spot. He played his college football at Northwestern, was drafted by the Houston Oilers, and then was traded his first year to the Buffalo Bills. And it was the perfect marriage because he played for a head coach by the name of Marv Levy, who really believed in special teams and gave him a lot of freedom and a lot of responsibility. And he performed amazingly over his career in Buffalo, is a Bills legend, works for the Bills now in radio, and is a really an outstanding person. So I'd like to introduce to you Steve Tasker.
Jeff, good night. Enjoy tonight. God bless tonight. It's going to be a long night, but for now, folks, enjoy Steve Tasker. Thanks for everyone getting their comments in, and see you soon, Jeff.
All right. Aloha. Hey, aloha. I want to introduce you to a legend, a Buffalo Bills and NFL legend, one of the greatest special teams players to ever line up and cover a punt or block a punt or do all the other things that the guy did in his career with the Buffalo Bills. Hall of Fame, NFL Hall of Fame nominee, Steve Tasker. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you, Jeff.
It's awesome to see you. Hey, tell our people, because we've got folks all over the world that watch this thing, Bills fans around the world, give them just a little taste of what it was like in Buffalo this past weekend.
Hard to imagine anything better than the way it was. I've equated it to, the year 30 years ago when we went 51-3 against the Raiders in the AFC Championship game. That's as close as I can think of. I mean, everything absolutely went perfectly for the Bills. They played fantastic football. The crowd was absolutely off its rocker. It was the first home playoff game the Bills had hosted since 1995 with fans in the stands. They had 2 last year, but there were only 6,000 people there. This last Saturday night, there were 68,000 people there. So it was an unbelievable night, really unforgettable for a lot of Bills fans, particularly given the opponent that they faced in the Patriots. And to see Josh Allen throw what many people say just a perfect game was pretty special. Everybody was there. Everybody turned out for that one, and it was really good to see. It was a special night.
I grew up as a baseball kid because of my dad's job, and a perfect game in baseball is the ultimate for a pitcher. And to play, and I don't know if there's ever been a perfect game by an NFL quarterback, but you're right. I think Josh Allen came about as close as you could get to perfection.
Yeah, I mean, he had more touchdowns than incompletions. They could not have gained another yard offensively. Every time they got the ball, they went all the way for a touchdown. They never got stopped. they had before they knelt down for a seventh third down. They were 6 of 6 on third down. The third downs were never more than 3rd and 4. They were 100% on third down conversions. They didn't turn the football over. They didn't lose a fumble. He threw for 300 plus yards. He ended the game with 12 straight completions. It was an unbelievable performance. The defense got a couple of sensational turnovers. Every time the Bills offense stepped on the field, they went for a touchdown. It was unbelievable. I'm really, when you take it all in, it's pretty unbelievable the kind of night he had, Josh Allen.
Steve, when I watched the game, and we're broadcasting the game, and one of the things that struck me, and I've never seen this ever with a Patriot football team, but after the second touchdown, the body language of the Patriots completely changed. I mean, they were a vanquished team from the second quarter on.
I said the same thing on our broadcast. When Dawson Knox caught his second touchdown in the first quarter, the Patriots were deflated because they knew, they've got Mac Jones, and I'm sure they like Mac Jones, and he's done some really good things for them, but it looked like they had no faith that they were going to be able to get back in that game with a 2-touchdown deficit against, the Bills, who would have the number one defense in the league. And you could feel it. And I know this too. Later on in the second quarter, Devin Singletary ran one in from 16 yards out. They went up 26 to what turned out 26-3 or 26-0. And a couple of Patriot guys, just as he was crossing the line, the goal line play was still almost going on. The guys were jogging off. They'd had it. I mean, they were just, the body language was absolutely bad. And they looked like a tired team, did New England. They looked tired. Some guys said they were old and a little slow. To me, even their young players looked slow and looked exhausted. It looked like they just were spent early in that game. And I don't know whether it was the fact that they didn't have any faith or, they just were tired. I don't know. But you're right. I had never seen a Patriots team perform as poorly as the one did last Saturday night.
The place that nobody talks about, the Bills, and obviously you watch them every day in practice. You go to, you're involved in every game. You're a guy that's played the game at the highest level. But the offensive line performed, for a patchwork group of guys. And really, if there's a place on that football team where you question, okay, are they good enough? The first thing you would say is, can they run the ball well enough? Right? If you get into a game where you have to run football. And I thought Singletary obviously was fantastic, but the offensive line, Steve, played really, really a good football game.
Yeah, this offensive line was shuffled every week during the regular season. Virtually every week they had a different starting group. There was never more than 2 weeks in a row where they had the same 5 guys on the field. COVID, injuries, poor play. They were shuffling guys in and out the entire season up until the second quarter of the second New England game in Foxborough. They got an injury to Ike Butker. They inserted Ryan Bates at left guard, and then that put Spencer Brown from left tackle over to right tackle, Darrell Williams down to the right guard, and put Deion Dawkins, who is just fresh off the COVID list. They didn't even think he was going to play that game. They plugged him back in at his left tackle spot. Those 5 guys, since that moment, seem to have caught a little bit of lightning in a bottle. They have clicked. And now they've got like 3 or 4 weeks together that they've spent more time together than any combination of 5 guys all season. So now they feel like that's their guys, and they're getting every rep, and they're taking it, and they're getting better and better. And I think that showed a little bit against the New England Patriots in the wild card round. The fact that this is a group that's been together longer than any other 5 guys on the squad, any combination of 5 guys at those spots. They've got more reps than anybody. So now they're starting to feel a little bit better and come together. And no question it showed through against the Patriots.
All right. You and I are teammates. We have a huge win. All right. But you know as well as I do, the first thing we got to do now is enjoy it for 24, flush it, and let's move on. So let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs and what could be, a de facto Super Bowl matchup, if you really want to say. It's much like those old 49er Cowboy rivalries in the 80s in the NFC, this could be the Super Bowl match for the Bills on the road in Kansas City.
Yeah, and there's not too many teams. You know, everybody was thinking you got to go through Kansas City to get to the Super Bowl. It's been that way since even when they were struggling early in the season. When they got it together, everybody knew, okay, they're going to be there at the end. And even before the season started, they were the favorites. I think the Bills may be the only team of the 7 that made the playoffs, maybe the 8 or 9 that were eligible. You know, they had a shot at it in that last weekend. I think the Bills are the only team that would look forward to a shot at taking a swing at the Chiefs in Kansas City. They are fresh off that AFC Championship game loss at less than a year ago. They went back in there and they beat the Chiefs by a bigger margin than the Chiefs beat them in the AFC Championship. And they want to go in and get it back. The Bills' defense is a couple of steps ahead of where it was in last year's AFC Championship game. It's a much better defense this year than it was a year ago. Their offense has another year under its belt and is just as good as it was a year ago, if not better, particularly given the way they played this last Saturday night. So the Bills may be the only team, maybe the only team in the league who wants a shot at it.
Well, you look at them, Steve, you look at them, and they're built to play Kansas City. They're built to beat Kansas City.
Yeah, they're built to
went
score.
out. Yeah, they went out and they enhanced their pass rush. Boogie Basham and Rousseau and Epinesa made a couple mistakes in the game the other night, but they bolstered the pass rush. You got the 2 best safeties in the league as a combination, as a tandem. Obviously, not having Tre'Davious White's going to be an issue, but they seem to be able to play through all that. You got the best cover linebacker in the league in Milano. So really, they're built to play the Chiefs, to match up against the Chiefs.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And that's what it looks like. They're no question, this offense is going to have to continue to click. You're going to have to score with those guys. And it may be, and I'm thinking back to 2017 in the Monday night game when the Rams played the Chiefs out in LA in the Coliseum. It was like 55-51. You kind of get the idea that whoever has the ball last in this game coming up on this weekend for the Bills and the Chiefs, whoever has the ball last is going to have a chance to win it. You're really going to have to light it up to stay in this game. The Chiefs have shown they're impossible to stop down in the red zone. They're so creative with Mahomes, being able to flip the ball forward on all those shovel passes and the back passes and Kelsey's throwing a touchdown pass, all of that stuff. They're really creative in the red zone. You're going to have to get a stop on them at some point to win the game or get turnovers. And the Bills are going to have to score when they get the ball. But the Bills are up for it. I mean, I think this is a team in Buffalo that will relish the chance to take a swing at it. There's no guarantees, obviously. The Chiefs are a fantastic football team. But I think the Bills, like I said, are really the only team, I think, in the tournament that won't flinch going into Kansas City. And they're going to be looking for a chance to take a swing at the Chiefs.
Well, I think it's going to be a fantastic football game. I appreciate you coming on with us today. As always, it's great to talk football with you. And again, I know you'll be in Arrowhead rooting for your Bills hard as possible.
Yeah, man. Thanks. I appreciate it, Jeff. It's good talking to you, man.
All right, Steve. Thank you very much. That's Steve Tasker, one of the greatest that ever played the game and an all-time Buffalo Bill. Took some time out to talk to the tribe today. Thank you, Steve.